Today, our government is proposing a policy that aims to help the European unions, that aims to help the society and the whole world. And first, in my constructive speech, it will be the rebuttals to our opposition team, and it will be my arguments to support why our government needs to have this policy and how it can achieve our aims to help the whole world and the European unions to become stronger. So now, let's move on to talk about the rebuttals to the opposition team. Then in their speech, they talk about two things actually. They talk about why the European unions have the responsibility to become a check and balance of US and China in the whole world. It's actually not about whether they have the responsibility to do so. It's about whether they could become a federal superstate. That will be the outcome, and that outcome is favorable to the world. And what we are talking about, why the two the opposition team asks about why the two powers cannot achieve the check and balance system, and I will explain that. It is because when the two powers they are having similar or one of the, like US is stronger, but China is weaker at that time, but they are also the superstate, so they cannot actually achieve the check and balance system. But what about the three ones? What about the three that would form a triangular form as mentioned by our Prime Minister? It is when one is stronger, the other two can still cooperate with each other, and that is the outcome that we want to do so. And that is actually the right for the European Union to do so, and their responsibility for the sake of themselves and for the sake of the whole world. And next, they talk about it will cause a lot of harm to other European members if they form a federal state, because there is central power to control them. However, what the European unions face, the most dangerous things that they're facing are not from the internal side, they're from the external side. So what we need to do is to build them into a federal superstate, to have them to build the mutual consensus and cooperation together so that they can become stronger together. And secondly, it is about the characteristics of the European unions. Is about they actually share a lot of common interests, particularly in the economics. They share a lot of economic opportunities and cooperation and nowadays. So it is not about whether it is because they're actually sharing a lot of common interests, so it won't cause the effects that are set by the opposition team. So why do we need a one more political and economic federal over super state than to have US and China? As the Prime Minister has told about, it is to balance the overwhelming power of US or China, and it is about to prevent the intervention of the US and China to further exploit the third world or other developing countries. So when we have one more or superstate, it is actually to provide a check and balance system, and to not to have too many states for the other two superstates to have to intervene in other countries, or to have too much states in the international conferences. So it is actually safeguarding the rights of different countries and for the whole world. It is a favorable. It is an advantage to the whole world. And now we are talking. Now we are talking also about the division of the responsibility. As we all know that there are a lot of countries in the whole world, and we desperately need the leading position to have to divide their responsibility. There are a lot of world problems need to be solved nowadays, like some energy, environment problems, or some freedoms and rights problems of human beings in the third countries. It is actually the responsibility, the division of responsibility. And when we have one more political, economic federal superstate, we can have achieved the division of responsibility, and it is for the sake of the whole society. And now we're talking about why the Europeans are why the Europeans. And so it is also beneficial to the nations, and why they have the prerequisite and conditions required to be the kind of federal super state. As the nature of the unions is that they have a long history of development, the cooperation of different countries. They're very special, and it is an edge over other countries. But it is when they can unite together and utilize the uniqueness and characteristics of each country. It actually contributes to the development of the whole nation. And how can we achieve it? It is by the division of labor and by the specialization. It actually provides a lot of economic and political opportunities to these European unions. As we all know that they are now facing some problem in their economic conditions due to the financial crisis, and how we can solve them, and how we can use this challenge, use this problem to further improve the European unions, and how we can stand up again and become a super state. It is actually provide them to create a consensus and foundation to foster their relationship, which these countries actually share the same economic conditions and the same economic interests. It is a chance for them to cooperate with each other during the crisis. Actually, when they can utilize each other's advantage, it can use the comparative advantage. It can make sure that they go to the same direction. If they go in the economic development, they go into the same direction, into the same goal, that it will actually help foster the economic development of the European nations. And when we talk about the political opportunities, it is about the management of the European Union to help further achieve the development of the whole European nations, including the economic development. It is about the consensus and discussion beforehand. So when they are encountering the financial crisis, we can show that there are some cracks, there are some incorporation of each country. But why we need to build such a federal super state? It's actually beneficial to the European unions that it can be a foundation to build some consensus. And with this consensus on the foreign affairs and military policy, we can protect their country. And then it is about how they save their resources and reduce the conflicts together so as to achieve a better overall development. So as we can see that in the policy, we are giving a chance for the whole world, giving a chance for the European nations. So that's why we proudly propose this policy. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, we're saying that the government side is going so far to kind of reach a world of three powers. But is that telling us why it's mostly likely happen that European Union eventually become a super state? The main problem here is you're trying to say that because when you skip to the conclusion as three superpowers, that actually will become the world peace. Ladies and gentlemen, to this response we have several responses. First, why it's most possible and why there will be a consensus, mutual consensus during the different nations like Germany, England, that they're going to establish a super state. The second thing, even though there's three superpowers, we think that will not help the world. Actually, will help. Will force the situation to explore the third world country to going to suffer more, even become a messy. We think that your idea like us three going to the power check and balance has already failed. So we're trying to argue it later. And furthermore, we're trying to see that division of responsibility, how to deal with that energy and the right of several people. Ladies and gentlemen, we think that in the world scenario, is every country is run on their own interests. Every country tries to protect and maximize their own benefit. So when we come to the European Union, all of the benefit, all of the problem you're trying to sell out that already function well in EU system, but didn't realize why the government trying to put forward, trying to uniquely stand out this kind of super states to solve what kind of problem. You fail to identify what problem exists in the European Union. And furthermore, you fail to telling us, to explain to us why you're modeled, why you're like super states. This kind of mechanism will gradually and finally solve the problem very effectively, right? We think we need a lot of response from the lower house to try to help us to prove to us why this kind of super state will actually uniquely solve the problem, is beneficial, and even more important is every country like European Union, like Germany, England, from the sake of their own interests, were more likely to become a super state. What we're trying to do is things are not going to happen that according to different resources, different things happen in political, economic, and different cultural background that the European Union is not possibly going to become a super state or why? We think that we need to use another analogy from the American states and the United States, right? From the first one is about the political, right? We think that why the states can become a federal control. We think it's historically that people in that certain area share the same culture, share the same value. They're trying to fight for ultimate one goal and under control by the central government. But when we come back to the EU, right? Listen, we think that when the EU is, even though the EU Eurozone is trying to what they're trying to do is maintain their cultural differences. They still have a lot of differences in the first place. Like Germany, like Great, like England, the 27 members already has their own value and own culture. We think that historically that there's differences between cultural background that they are not more likely to undermine. And furthermore, we think that superstate is more likely to undermine the cultural differences and cause conflict. It's like the states happen, the conflict between white and black in America history, that because of policy making process, the state's process on the political parties are more likely to follow the majority and undermine the voice of minority. The minorities' rights cannot be maintained and guaranteed by the government that cause a lot of conflict. It's also happening in China, like Tibetan, in western part of Xinjiang. When the government wants to establish this kind of super state or trying to control at the whole, that their policy actually undermining the differences, cultural differences, that eventually cause conflict between the people around inside the country, that also people suffering. We see that the problem, the government failed to explain, to trying to tell us why it's more possible that people willing to cooperate in the first place. Okay, second thing, economic. Furthermore, they're trying to solve the problem of economic crisis happening in United States, like EU, right? The thing that the first thing is, like states, even though we think that they can have an economic plan, a budget, or taxes, which is created by even different states, right? We think that they are according to different. Actually, we think that states, every state at most relatively the same level, close level in development of economic. But when we're back to the European country, like Germany, the GDP, and compare the GDP of Germany and Greece, how is it possible, and how is it more likely that Germany will willing to sacrifice their development of economic to help the Greece? So this is a problem exactly happening in EU. So the government actually have to prove to us why this kind of super states that actually will solve the problem that like more developed states or more developed nation like Germany, England, or others, France, are trying to sacrificing their own interest, sacrificing their sustainable development, trying to help Greece other nation, right? So furthermore, we see also there's the differences between states and the EU, right? States will give them some kind of autonomy to making their own policy and making their own regulation. But when it comes to the European Union, we see that every country has their own sovereignty they have to protect. They have to protect their own people. We see that this is very different from states in America and federal. Even though, so the things that happen, why the country have to sacrifice their sovereignty to compare and to just become a nation, become a super state that's going to do so. And furthermore, we see the country itself, every political leader in the European Union, they will make regulation, they will check and balance, they will treat out what is the best consequence. The moment they realize that super states actually do no harm, no benefit, only harm the state's own, the nation is own, they won't why is it justified for government trying to say that this kind of ideal super state will solve the problem that people will reach consensus, eventually reach a goal? So, based on this, we're proud to propose.
Yeah.